Well, in the book, you said that as you're driving up towards the BMW, with Suge driving and Tupac in the passenger seat, and you said that Tupac pulled out a gun.
It looked like he was reaching, yeah.
This is Keefe D, the Crip OG charged with orchestrating Tupac's murder in '96. Now a new video shows him in studio sessions with Biggie weeks before Pac got hit, shooting dice and breaking bread like they were homies. Did Biggie know what Keefe D was planning? Was Biggie being watched and marked for death next? I've got the full story. Let's break it down. When OGs cross enemy lines. For damn near 3 decades, the whole world been told that Tupac Shakur's murder was straightforward street business, a coastal beef that got too hot, ending with a drive-by on the Vegas Strip September 7th, 1996. The story everybody knows is about gang retaliation, about Death Row's blood connections clashing with Bad Boys' Crip affiliations, about diss tracks and magazine interviews that turned a rap beef into something deadly. But check it, this is where things get real complicated, where the whole narrative we've been fed starts cracking under pressure from some serious revelations. Recent confessions from multiple sources, including Keefe D himself dropping bombs in interviews, and OGs like BG Knockout confirming the story, paint a picture that's way more twisted and dirty than just some simple gang politics gone wrong.
Big developments in the case of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the man accused of orchestrating the murder of rap icon Tupac Shakur back in the 1990s. All these years later, the former gang leader is behind bars in Las Vegas and is insisting the case be thrown out. And he is implicating another music legend who's making headlines, Sean Diddy Combs.
Let's keep it a buck about what we know for facts. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the OG who got hemmed up in September 2023 for orchestrating Pac's murder, wasn't just some random West Coast banger who happened to be in Vegas that night. Nah, homie was a shot caller for the Southside Compton Crips, true, but he was also somebody who moved in circles that went way beyond Compton streets. He was plugged in with some of the biggest names on the East Coast, including Big Papa himself, the notorious Big.
So let's talk about what happens next. You know, based on what the book says, Zip gave you guys a Glock, and you guys tossed it in the back seat. And Bubble Up was a driver, and Baby Lane and Freaky were in the back seat.
We was just all in the car together.
Now, before we get deep into how these connections went down, you gotta understand something crucial about the mid-90s hip-hop landscape. The East Coast-West Coast beef that everybody been talking about for years, the one hyped up in magazines and on MTV and in diss records, wasn't really as black and white as they made it seem. Behind closed doors, away from the cameras and the award shows and all the public drama, there was a whole different level of relationships, business moves, and social mixing that crossed lines people thought couldn't be crossed. The revelation that got everybody in their feelings centers on accounts of Keefe D being in actual studio sessions with Biggie, Puff Daddy, and Bone Thugs and Harmony while they were laying down tracks for Biggie's Life After Death album. This wasn't no quick run-in at the club or bumping into each other at some industry party. According to multiple witnesses, including what Keefe D himself said on record, this was a whole situation where a certified West Coast Crip OG was posted up, chopping it up, and doing business with East Coast hip-hop royalty. And this was supposedly happening right when the coastal rivalry was at its most hostile.
No. Before Tupac got out of prison, they had a summer jam. And Biggie had that song, One More Chance. It was the hottest song on the fucking chart. And it was at Irvine Meadows. We went up there where they had a little revolving stage.
Think about how wild that really is when you sit with it. Really let that marinate. Here's a cat who would later get indicted for orchestrating Pac's murder, allegedly on orders from East Coast figures, just casually vibing in recording studios with the same artists and executives who were supposedly beefing hard with Death Row. Here's somebody from the Southside Crips, the set that was supposed to be against Death Row's blood politics, apparently moving through circles that included Puff and Biggie like it wasn't nothing. No tension, no drama. BG Knockout Sit Down with DJ Vlad in 2024 added more layers to this whole thing, describing a scene where Puff was literally shooting dice with Keefe D during studio sessions. This wasn't no standoff or hostile vibe. Homie described it as a straight-up social situation with thousands on the line in the dice game, showing a level of comfort and familiarity that completely contradicts the supposed hate that was being promoted through music and media.
The night before, we met Puff at the House of Blues. And he told us they having a celebrity game and they having a thing with Quincy Jones at that,
The car museum.
yeah, the car museum.
But yo, the most chilling part of all this is the account from Gene Deal, Puff's former bodyguard, who's on record saying he personally introduced Keefe D to Biggie on March 9th, 1997, the exact same night Biggie got murdered just hours later. According to Deal's version of events, this introduction went down at the Peterson Automotive Museum party in what was supposed to be a secured VIP-only area. Think about how crazy that is. A cat who had allegedly been involved in orchestrating Pac's murder just 6 months prior was getting introduced to Pac's supposed rival by that rival's own security, with nobody raising any red flags or questioning if that was the move. Now let's be clear about something. Research shows there ain't no verified new video footage that exists showing Biggie directly with Keefe D before Pac's murder, despite what some clickbait headlines might try to tell you. What we got instead are first-hand accounts from multiple people who were actually there. Keefe, D himself, BG Knockout, Gene Deal, all describing interactions that paint a completely different picture than the simple East versus West story we've been fed for decades. These are real testimonies from cats who were in the room, who saw what went down, describing a reality that goes against everything the public narrative and music videos were pushing. The timing of all these interactions is mad significant when you really break it down. The Life After Death recording sessions ran from 1995 through 1997, which means these meetups between Keefe D and East Coast figures could have happened both before and after Pac got hit in September 96. Keefe D's story has changed up over time too. In one 2022 interview, he claimed he was directly in studio sessions. Then in his 2023 full interview, he walked some of that back. The fact that his story keeps shifting tells you there's a whole web of connections and moves that even Keefe D himself might have had reasons to keep on the low or twist up. What makes all these revelations so explosive is how they completely reshape what we thought we understood about what was really going down behind the scenes of the East Coast-West Coast beef. For years, the street's been told a story of pure hatred, of differences that couldn't be squashed, of a rivalry so deep that it could only end in bodies dropping. But these accounts suggest something way more grimy, a situation where business relationships and social connections were still active even as the public beef was escalating, where supposed enemies were in the same rooms together, where the lines between rivalry and reality were way more blurred than anybody wanted to admit. This fundamentally changes how we gotta look at what went down in 96 and 97. If Keefe D had access to East Coast figures, if there were ongoing business and social relationships that crossed supposed enemy lines, then the whole narrative of simple gang retaliation gets way more complicated. It raises real questions about who knew what, when they knew it, and what role different players had in everything that jumped off. When the game gets deeper than rap. To really understand why these connections between Keefe D and the East Coast elite matter so much, we gotta dive deep into the bread and the politics that were really driving all this. Because real talk, this wasn't just about music or street beef or which coast was repping harder. This was about serious paper, power plays, and an industry machine that was blowing up bigger than anybody could have predicted.
Now, at the time of Shakur's death, Combs was beginning his meteoric rise to the top of the rap world. He had started Bad Boy Records, now called Bad Boy Entertainment. And of course, there was this ongoing feud, West Coast versus East Coast, with this feud that he had with Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight, again, the leader of Death Row.
At the center of Keefe D's most explosive claims is an allegation that's been echoing through the hood for years, that Sean Diddy Combs put up $1 million bounty for somebody to handle both Tupac and Suge Knight. This wasn't just street gossip or rumor mill talk. Keefe D laid all this out in his 2008 proffer with the feds, in his 2019 book Compton Street Legend, and in multiple interviews where he went into serious detail. Now check it, let's keep it 100. Puff has straight up denied all these allegations, calling them complete lies. He's never been charged with anything connected to either Pac or Biggie's murders. But the fact that these allegations keep coming up, the level of detail in Keefe D's accounts, and the whole context of that era make them impossible to just brush off and ignore.
So the report reads, in or around 1992, Martin introduced Davis to Sean Puffy Combs. Davis recalls the introduction occurring at the Paradise nightclub on Santa Monica Boulevard. After speaking with Combs, Davis agreed to allow Combs to use his 1964 Chevy in a music video.
According to Keefe D's detailed version of events, his plug with Puff went way back to the early 90s, connected through a middleman named Eric Zip Martin. This wasn't no one-time link-up or random connection. Keefe D describes multiple meetings, business situations, and social circles that paint a picture of an ongoing relationship that went way deeper than what anyone would expect, given the supposed territorial nature of the coastal beef. The alleged money arrangement, the way Keefe Keefe details it, wasn't just a simple transaction. According to what he put in his book and laid out in interviews, there were multiple conversations, meetings at spots like Greenblatt's restaurant in Hollywood, and tensions building up tied to when Pac dropped that devastating Hit 'Em Up diss track. In Keefe D's narrative, things reached a breaking point when Pac's attacks got so personal, so threatening, that they crossed the line from rap beef into what felt like real street danger.
So after the car that Knight and Shakur were in was hit by a hail of bullets back in 1996, Davis says that Combs wanted to know if that was the result of him allegedly putting out a hit on Shakur. The task force report states, well, at the restaurant, Martin told Davis that Combs had called Martin and asked, was that us?
But yo, here's where things get really murky, where the whole situation gets way more complex than any simple story about what went down. Because even if we take Keefe D's allegations at face value, even if we believe there really was a money offer, a straight up solicitation for violence, the question remains, why would somebody in Puff's position, somebody building a legitimate empire in the music game, risk everything for street drama? What could possibly be worth that kind of exposure, that level of risk to everything he was building? The answer might be in understanding just how high the stakes really were by 1996. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry wasn't just about pride or who was the realest. It was about market share, about who would control the exploding hip-hop industry, about hundreds of millions in potential revenue on the line. Death Row Records, with Suge Knight running things, had become an unstoppable force, with Pac's All Eyes on Me selling crazy units and establishing West Coast dominance in ways that threatened Bad Boy's whole position in the game. Consider the context of what was really happening. Pac's Hit 'Em Up wasn't just a diss track, it was a straight declaration of war that included real threats against Puff, Biggie, and everybody rocking with Bad Boy. The track had the line, "That's why I fucked your bitch, you fat motherfucker," coming at Biggie about his wife, Faith Evans, and made explicit threats about what Pac and his crew would do to their ops. This wasn't just entertainment or art, this was personal, this was threatening, and in the context of 1996, when the line between rap persona and real street business was already dangerous as hell, this was potentially life-threatening. Now let's talk about what Keefe D claims went down after Pac got hit. According to his statements in court documents, after the shooting on September 7, 1996, there were phone calls between him and Puff, going through Zip Martin, where Puff allegedly asked, "Was that us?" A question that Keefe D took to mean Puff was asking if the hit he'd allegedly ordered had been executed.
Well, in the book, you said that as you're driving up towards the BMW, with Suge driving and Tupac in the passenger seat, and you said that Tupac pulled out a gun.
It looked like he was reaching, yeah. Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you actually see a gun?
Oh, shit. Once he got the reaching, I got the ducking.
But here's the really grimy part of Keefe D's whole story. He claims that even though the job got done with Pac's death, him and his crew never got paid. According to his version, Zip Martin, the middleman, allegedly kept all the bread for himself, using it to open up a nightclub. This claim, if it's really what happened, adds another layer of tragedy and straight foolishness to an already horrific situation. The idea that Pac might have been murdered over money that was never even paid out, that the whole thing might have been a setup or a double cross on multiple levels. It's worth noting that recent investigations suggest Keefe D might have been working undercover after his initial confessions, trying to gather evidence against Puff and others. A 2024 report from The Source alleged that Keefe D went undercover specifically to prove Puff's involvement in both Pac and Biggie's murders, adding yet another layer of complexity to an already twisted story. But let's step back for a second and look at the bigger picture of what was really happening. The hip-hop industry in the mid-90s was going through a transformation unlike anything the game had ever seen. What started as underground, street-level culture had blown up into mainstream consciousness, with albums moving millions, artists starring in major films, and money flowing in ways that nobody could have anticipated. The stakes were enormous, and with those stakes came pressures, tensions, and conflicts that went way beyond simple artistic rivalry. The machinery of the music industry, the labels, the distribution deals, the marketing campaigns, the radio spins, the video budgets, all of this created an environment where success wasn't just about dropping hot tracks. It was about market domination, about creating narratives that moved units, about maintaining momentum in an increasingly competitive marketplace. And sometimes maybe that machinery created situations where the lines between marketing, reality, and genuine street danger got fatally blurred. This is where Keefe D's connections to both sides of the supposed rivalry become so crucial to understanding what really went down. If he was really moving in circles that included both West Coast street figures and East Coast music industry power players, then he was positioned right at the intersection of multiple worlds: the streets, the music business, the gang culture, the corporate interests, all of which were colliding in increasingly volatile ways by 1996. the fallout when the truth finally catches up. Fast forward to today, to September 2023, when Keefe D finally got picked up for Pac's murder after decades of investigation. The arrest didn't come because of new physical evidence dropping. It came because Keefe D had essentially snitched on himself multiple times in his 2008 proffer in his book and countless interviews. He basically talked himself into a murder charge by not being able to resist telling his story, not being able to resist claiming credit for one of the most infamous murders in music history.
New video tonight showing the moment Las Vegas police arrested Dwayne Keith Davis. He's the known gang member taken into custody last week for the shooting death of rapper Tupac Shakur. Investigators say Davis plotted and orchestrated the 1996 shooting. They say it was in retaliation for a fight the rapper had with Davis's nephew earlier that night inside the MGM Grand Hotel Casino.
But the legal proceedings have been anything but straightforward. As of October 2025, Keefe D's trial keeps getting pushed back, most recently delayed to February 2026. His defense team has been filing motion after motion trying to get the case thrown out, arguing that he had immunity agreements from his 2008 proffer that should protect him from catching charges. They've also been arguing that his confessions were all cap, made up just to get paid from book sales and interviews, and that he wasn't even in Vegas when the shooting went down, claiming his nephew Orlando Anderson was actually the trigger man. Thing is, Orlando got killed in an unrelated gang shooting back in 1998, making him conveniently unable to confirm or deny any part of the story.
That Monday, we was all sitting in our neighborhood. Reggie Sr., the captain of the Compton Police, comes up, run the stop sign. I guess he had just finished debriefing his soldiers at the Compton PD. He run our stop sign on my street, came up, jumped out of his car and like, "Hey, motherfucker, let me tell you something, Keefe D, you killed my son, motherfucker, it's on."
Judge Carly Kearney has been expressing concerns about potential cover-ups in the case, particularly around where Keefe D's bail money was really coming from. These concerns speak to the broader questions that have been haunting both Pac and Biggie's cases for decades. Who really knows what went down, who's protecting who, and how deep do the connections really go between the streets, the music industry, and law enforcement? The revelations about Keefe D's connections to Biggie and the East Coast figures add crucial context to all these questions. If, as multiple witnesses have testified, Keefe D was really vibing with East Coast figures during the peak of the rivalry, if he was actually at the party where Biggie got killed just hours before the shooting, then the simple narrative of gang retaliation becomes insufficient. These connections suggest a level of access, of social fluidity, of relationships that cross supposed enemy lines in ways that fundamentally challenge our understanding of what was really happening behind the scenes. Consider what BG Knockout told DJ Vlad about the vibe at those studio sessions. He described a scene where West Coast and East Coast cats were mixing freely, where bread was changing hands in dice games, where business was being conducted even as the public narrative of the rivalry was intensifying. This wasn't the portrait of enemies who couldn't be in the same room. This was the portrait of people who were all part of the same industry, the same world, even if they were supposed to be on opposite sides of a war. And what about Biggie himself? Where does he fit into all this? In his final interview, recorded just days before he got murdered, Biggie talked about wanting to move past the beef, about trying to use his influence to de-escalate everything after Pac's death. He recognized, maybe too late, the real danger that the rivalry had created for everybody involved.
Well, we just bought tickets from y'all. We should be hitting y'all joint. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, we kind of clowned him that day. Then the next time I ran into him, it was at the House of Blues.
The tragedy of Biggie's position becomes clearer when we understand the full context of these connections. If Keefe D was really introduced to him on the night of his death, if there were ongoing interactions between West Coast street figures and East Coast music industry personnel, then Biggie might have been caught in a web way more complex than he understood. He might have thought he was navigating a music industry rivalry, when in reality he was caught in something way more dangerous. A situation where street politics, gang affiliations, and business interests had become fatally entangled. Recent court filings have revealed that prosecutors in Pac's case have been given access to files from Biggie's unsolved murder investigation. The connections between the two cases go beyond simple theories of revenge. They speak to overlapping networks of people, relationships, and potentially criminal conspiracies that may have been operating across both coasts. This brings us back to the central question: what does all this really mean? What are we supposed to make of these revelations about connections between Keefe D and the East Coast hip-hop elite? How do they change our understanding understanding of what went down in 96 and in 97. First off, they force us to abandon the simple narratives we've been told. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry was real, but it was also way more complicated, way more nuanced, and way more intertwined with business and industry concerns than the public-facing beef suggested. Behind the scenes, there were ongoing relationships, business dealings, and social interactions that crossed supposed enemy lines. Interactions that might have been opportunistic, strategic, or simply reflective of the reality that everyone involved was part of the same relatively small world of 1990s hip-hop. Second, they raised serious questions about who knew what and when. If Keefe D was moving in circles that included East Coast figures, if there were ongoing interactions before and after Pac's death, then questions about culpability and knowledge become way more pressing. Did Biggie know about these connections? Did other bad boy figures understand the full extent of the relationships between West Coast street elements and East Coast music industry personnel? And crucially, what did this mean for the safety and security of everyone involved? Third, and maybe most importantly, these revelations underscore the human cost of the industry machinery that was churning in the mid-90s. Two of the most talented artists of their generation got killed, their deaths unsolved for decades, their legacies forever tied to violence and tragedy. Countless others got caught up in the violence, from Orlando Anderson to Yaki Gaddafi to numerous others who got killed in the gang violence that erupted around these cases.
So you have a sense of remorse for what happened to Tupac?
Yeah. I got a sense of remorse that happened to any brother. You know what I'm saying? We should stop all this bullshit with each other, black on black crimes. It's bullshit. You need to wake up our whole community.
The machinery of the music industry, the need to create compelling narratives, to drive sales, to dominate markets, may have created an environment where performative beef became real danger, where marketing strategies became matters of life and death. And maybe most tragically, it created a situation where the lines between art and reality, between entertainment and genuine threat, got so blurred that nobody could clearly see where one ended and the other began. As we approach Keefe D's February 2026 trial, mad questions still remain unanswered. Will Suge Knight get subpoenaed to testify? Will Puff face any legal consequences for the allegations Keefe D has been making? Will we finally get definitive answers about what really jumped off in those crucial years between 1994 and 1997? What we can say for certain is that the story is way more complex than what we've been told. The connections between Keefe D and East Coast figures, whether they were purely social, partly business related, or something more sinister, reveal a landscape where supposed enemies were in closer contact than anybody wanted to admit. They reveal an industry where the boundaries between legitimate business and street culture were dangerously porous, where relationships crossed lines that were supposed to be uncrossable, and where the consequences of these crossings were ultimately fatal. The legacy of Pac and Biggie extends way beyond their music. As influential as that music was and continues to be, their deaths marked a turning point in hip-hop, forcing the culture to confront the reality of what happens when the machinery of fame, the dynamics of gang culture, and the pressures of commercial success collide. The revelations about Keefe D's connections to both sides of the rivalry add another chapter to that legacy, a chapter that reminds us how little we still truly understand about what happened and why. As we wait for justice delayed by decades but potentially finally arriving, we're left with a portrait of an era when hip-hop was simultaneously reaching its greatest commercial heights and facing its darkest moments. An era when the lines between friend and enemy, between business and violence, between art and reality, had become so confused that nobody could navigate them safely. And an era whose echoes we still feel today every time we hear a Biggie or Pac track, every time we contemplate what might have been if things had gone differently. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.